Toy Story 5 is a movie that I really wasn't expecting much from, since it feels like this franchise has ended two separate times already, and now it just feels more like a cash grab. But honestly, I left the theater surprised. Right off the bat, what Toy Story 5 does really well is bring back that emotional core. This movie understands that Toy Story isn't really about toys. It's about growing up, letting go, and figuring out where you belong when your purpose starts to change. And that theme hits hard again here. Woody and Buzz are back to their duo adventures just like in the first film, and their dynamic still works. There's something instantly comforting about hearing those voices again, seeing them bounce off each other like no time has passed. But what I really appreciated is that the movie doesn't just rely on nostalgia, it actually pushes their characters forward in a meaningful way. One of those characters is Jessie, which I think was very clever to make her the center of the film and have her step into Woody's shoes and take charge in Bonnie's happiness. Without spoiling too much, this story leans heavily into what happens when toys are no longer the center of a kid's world. And in today's world, that idea feels even more relevant. Kids aren't just playing with toys anymore. They've got screens, games, constant distractions, and the movie tackles that head on in a pretty clever way. Visually, this might be the best Toy Story has ever looked. Pixar continues to do that thing where somehow everything feels more real but still stylized. The lighting, the textures, even small details like fabric or plastic, it all looks insanely polished. There are moments in this movie that genuinely make you forget you're watching animation. The biggest issue with Toy Story 5 is that it struggles to justify its own existence at times. The story is good, but it doesn't always feel necessary. There are moments where you can feel the movie trying to recapture past magic instead of creating something entirely new, and when that happens, it sticks out. The new characters are great additions to the story, and I feel like they added great emotional and comedic depth. Lilypad is also a great character that drives the story and is written very well, where she isn't necessarily the antagonist and just wants the same thing the toys want for Bonnie, just in a different perspective. And at the end, when they can both work together to achieve their goal, it works perfectly. So if you're going in expecting another masterpiece, you might be a little disappointed, but if you're just looking for one more meaningful adventure with Woody, Buzz, and the gang, there's still a lot here to enjoy. At the end of the day, Toy Story 5 doesn't redefine the franchise, but it does add another chapter that, while not essential, still feels worth experiencing. I'd give it an 8 out of 10.